So a huge development today after a year-long investigation that we took on after getting a number of tips about an under-the-radar Christian sect known as the 2x2 Church. And not only did we expose decades of child sexual abuse, but several of the leaders who were committing the crimes.
This is our first follow-up since our investigation aired, as one of the church elders is now headed to prison for the rest of his life.
For each count 1, 12 years in the Department of Corrections, count 6, 12 years in the Department of Corrections, and count 10, 12 years in the Department of Corrections. With
Raymond Zwiefelhofer was a leader in the secretive and isolated 2x2 Church until earlier this fall. He was convicted of possessing child sexual abuse material.
There were 87 files that were determined to be child sexual abuse material, or sometimes known as child pornography. The 10 charged files were all depicting children under the age of 15.
Zwiefelhofer was convicted of 10 counts and sentenced to 120 years in prison.
It's illegal simply to possess and for the defendant to know about it. In Arizona, if you're convicted on one count, it's a minimum of 10 years in prison.
Zwiefelhofer maintains his innocence.
I'm not guilty again. I'd like to make that clear. I would love to know how the jury found that I knowingly did this.
Zwiefelhofer, who is 61, had been a tech CEO. Ex-members tell us he was also a 2x2 church elder on and off for decades.
An elder leads a group of members in their home through church services. I would say there are almost always children present in the home meetings.
The church is so secretive and isolated, most people haven't even heard of it. We've been investigating the Christian sect for more than a year now, specifically looking at the allegations of widespread child sexual abuse.
2x2 Church has a significant problem with child sexual abuse. It is systemic. And the cover-up of the abuse has been ongoing in the 2x2 Church for decades.
Cynthia Lyles is a private investigator who's been digging deep into the church and says she works regularly with the FBI.
Raymond Zwiefelhofer is one of most likely thousands. I have notified the FBI of over 1,000 accounts of child sex abuse and sex assault.
What makes the 2x2 Church so unique is the way it operates. Ministers of the church are known as workers and live with members in their homes, usually for days at a time.
We're getting reports of child sex abuse and sex assault committed by the highest level in leadership down to the regular members.
While Zwiefelhofer is the first member of the 2x2 Church to be convicted and sentenced to prison in the U.S. since our original investigation aired, some members claim there's been a deep history and pattern of abuse for decades.
Somehow, the 2x2 Church has become a breeding ground for sex offenders and pedophiles. Hopefully, there will be more arrests and convictions coming.
There's no one head of the church, but we did reach out to the overseer, the man in charge of Arizona who oversaw Zwiefelhofer. He never called us back. As for the former and current overseers with whom we did speak, all of them denied knowing anything about the widespread sexual abuse taking place within the 2x2 community. In a rare exclusive interview in June, we sat down with the FBI at the Omaha field office that's now leading the worldwide investigation. Have you ever heard of something this widespread?
When we first put out the initial message requesting people provide us information, we did receive quite a bit of information.
The FBI insists that anyone who experienced abuse should contact them. Let's say you arrest one person, 2 people. Is that it?
The FBI focuses, in general, on bringing cases from local to global. The FBI doesn't stop at just an initial arrest. We will follow the evidence wherever it leads.
We spoke to dozens of alleged victims of child sexual abuse across more than 30 states. Many of the ex-members we spoke to say that some of the church leadership knew about the abuse allegations, but didn't report any of it to the authorities. Rather than calling in the cops, alleged abusers kept on working, but in different states.
The shuffling of abusers from state to state to state, from country to country to country, is common. Get the abuser out of Dodge.
The belief that their one true way, their interpretation of God's law, supersedes man's.
All these institutions think they're above the law because God is on their side. These institutions are havens for sexual abusers. And a child cannot protect the child.
Protection so many members say they never had. There's Cheryl Owings in North Carolina, who says her abuse began when she was 7 in 1955. Laura Lee Brown in California, who says she was 9. And there's a girl in Montana whose family says she was just 2 years old. She is now 13. Sherry Autry says she was 14 when a worker named Steve Rose moved into her home. So Steve Rose moves into your house. What happened?
So the first night, hey Sherry, let's go down to the barn, tell scary stories, feed the dogs, and started kissing me.
What happened next?
It went from just kissing to him coming to my room at night. There was touching under the clothes. When we went to his room is when it was more explicit.
And then what?
He'd have me grab his penis. He'd be touching me everywhere, kissing me.
You were 14, he was 28.
I was a little girl. I hadn't started my period. There was nothing womanly about me.
Rose stayed in Sherry's home for 2 months. She says the abuse happened every day. Stayed in Sherry's home for 2 months. She says the abuse happened every day.
In November 2012, Cornelius Devers sued Wells Fargo because there was a dispute over who gets the...
I saw war. I saw bombing. I saw...
It took 3 years before Sherry could get the courage to tell her parents about Steve Rose. And when she did, they immediately believed her. Rose later wrote a letter to his overseer, admitting to the abuse.
I would like to say and make very clear, we did not have sexual intercourse. We did kiss and touch each other intimately. This did not happen with anyone else. I did not intend to cover this up, but I did not know how to handle it other than to leave the area and beg God to forgive me.
Members of the church leadership never reported Steve Rose's abuse to the police, but his overseer, Eldon Tenniswood, recognized the abuse in a letter he wrote to Rose, saying, "Remember, Stephen, at that time you were 28 years old and she was 14 years old, which would make what you did a felony." So we tried several times to call Steve Rose. We did get him on the phone. He hung up on me. So we're now in Minneapolis. Tony has me mic'd up, and we're going to head over to his work, hoping that he will answer our questions on camera. Yep, that's him.
Yep, that's him. I would say start approaching him.
Ready? Steve Rose, Kira Phillips with ABC News. I'd like to ask you about these letters that you wrote Sherry Autry's parents and also your overseer. Did you sexually abuse Sherry Autry when she was 14 and you were 28? Sherry has been trying to find justice, but when we reached out to the Tulare County District Attorney's Office, we got this statement: any potential crime falls outside of California's statute of limitations.
If my sharing my story protects one child, just one child anywhere, from being sexually abused, I'm willing to tell my story.